Okay, guys, one of the things that I promised when I started this was that I wasn't going to mask. So I got to be honest, it's 10 past 8 and the big light is on. And I hate the big light being on this late at night. So I'm going to try filming this a little bit darker and hopefully it comes out okay. Let's see how we go, hey? Okay, I like this much better. Hopefully this is okay for you. So welcome to episode number 3 of the Busy Brains Hub podcast. I was just sitting there thinking, what's the name of my show again? I'm just very casually in my house clothes at the moment, and I'm really excited about our topic today. I think it's one that a lot of neurodivergent people can relate to. So why can success feel or leave us feeling so empty inside, right? I think I'm saying the word empty assuming that you know what it means. I think it's a physical sensation. For me, it's somewhere that sits in my abdomen, and it kind of feels like there's nothing left to latch onto, to grab onto. Like with all of these episodes, we're going to be talking about mental health challenges. So if it's something that you're not in the mood for right now, go and listen to another podcast and you can come back and listen to this when you feel like it. But I'll try to keep it light. I'll try to keep it somewhat funny. I'll attempt to be funny at least. But I think, sort of maybe where we can start with this is, what happens when we try to achieve things. I remember actually talking to my therapist about this some time ago. So I was explaining to her that for me, I was brought up playing instruments. I was actually homeschooled as a kid until I was about 11, and I was like an overachiever. I was very achievement driven. I liked the pat on the back, right? But I also, once I got that, I didn't really feel anything. It was sort of like I just was doing the chasing. And I remember bringing it up to my therapist years ago. I said she was a psychotherapist, so couldn't diagnose or anything like that. And we actually never really talked that much about ADHD, if I'm honest. Probably talked more about anxiety, depression. Again, couldn't diagnose, but sort of like talking about those symptoms. And I'd been diagnosed with depression by a doctor. And I was like, it's funny when I have like a big thing. Like I used to work in corporate events and media marketing, that kind of stuff. And it would be like really, adrenaline rush, dopamine driven, got to achieve stuff, very consistent with my upbringing, of like trying to achieve things. And I was like, I get this same feeling that I used to get when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I learnt violin and piano, and I can't remember if I just said I learned violin before already. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. And I was like, I'd get so excited about performing. I really enjoyed being on stage. Practice, and I would get the butterflies kind of in like a good way, sometimes not in such a good way. But like, okay, I'm going to go up and perform. And then I get on stage, I'd perform, and then I would get off the stage and people would say, oh, well done, that's great, nice work, you were really good, oh wow, how are you, all that nice stuff that you get when you do a good performance, I guess. And I just felt really like, like that doesn't feel as good as I thought it would feel, like I was really chasing that sense of recognition from other people. But when I got it, I was like, this feels really not like how I thought it would. And, later on in life, I would call that emptiness. When I was a kid, I didn't really think of it like that. I was just like, oh, why don't I really care about this? Why doesn't this feel like that thing that I thought I was meant to feel when I succeed, And so anyway, I was relaying this to my therapist as well, and we talked about it a little bit. And I remember she was trying to kind of like delve into it, but I think at the time I didn't probably get any great insight into why that was happening. And So I just thought I would sort of bring it. Gee, I do look a bit pale, don't I? Just look down at myself on the screen. Oh well, we'll touch that up with filters, I guess, or not, whatever. So why does this happen? And I kind of did a bit of a brain dump here with a little bit of help from artificial intelligence, because I do find that when it comes to a brainstorm, it's always good to have a chat with ChatGPT about it as well. And I guess I've got a little bit of a list of a few things it could be, and you can kind of walk away, hopefully, from today's episode with a little bit more of an idea of what might be going on for you than what I had when I had that therapy chat. I'm not blaming my therapist. It's just sometimes you can't get there, right, in a session. Sometimes, like for me anyway, I'd go and then I'd forget about it and move on. Okay, so first one is you can get a dopamine crash, right? So when you have a sense of urgency, like I mentioned those corporate events before, or exams, right? Like you're like, okay, I've got to do this. I have to get this done now. A lot of ADHDers in particular, great when there's a sense of urgency, perform really, really well. Not all ADHDers, it's like different for different people, but for a lot of us, actually under that pressure and sense of urgency, we can deliver. And that gives us that dopamine and adrenaline as well, right? Like, and a bunch of other things like that our brain is sort of craving, like, okay, now I'm firing on all cylinders, go, 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 go. And we can outperform neurotypicals in that, in that state. But then after that, it's like you get this literal, like your neurotransmitters just go, that dopamine just comes crashing down, almost like you're coming off a high, right? It's just you're coming off a natural high. And our body's like, okay, like now I don't feel so great, Another type of crash you can get is like burnout. So if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and you're hyper-focusing, that's something that I find I do a lot. Hyper-focusing, really stuck into what I'm doing for hours and hours and hours and hours, or days and days and days. And then my body's like, you need to sleep, and during that time, I might sleep very little. I will be going over things in my mind over and over and over and over again. Like hyperfocus, I think it's talked about as a strength, and it can be used. It can definitely be utilized, I think. But it can be hard to, sort of regulate. It can be hard. For me, one of the things that I really struggle with is that once I'm in that state, I find it hard to like talk to people. I kind of like become a little bit less verbal. I'm like, I'm not really paying attention to what's going on in the outside world. I'm kind of completely in my head. And so that can actually become physically exhausting, mentally exhausting, especially if we're not sleeping, we're not eating properly, we're not getting out and exercising. So we can have that type of burnout crash as well. Another thing that can happen is, let's say that you do actually feel good from succeeding. Like in that moment, you're like, tick, I did that. Great. One of the things that can happen is that because for a lot of us, we can have issues with emotional regulation. It's like our brain can actually struggle to hold on to those sort of happy, good feeling hormones and neurotransmitters, the chemicals in our brain that are going, yay, we did this, woo. It's like, yep, okay. And then our brain's just like, boom, done. And that will, again, depend. Not everyone necessarily will experience that. And that's why I'm just kind of giving you like a bit of a brain dump so you can maybe sort through some of those things of what you think it is for you. I should mention, I always put a transcript of this up on my Substack page. So I think you can just go there, the podcast, like if you're listening to it on Spotify or iTunes, I think you can click through to my Substack page. Otherwise, just look up Busy Brains Hub Substack. And I've got a transcript. So if you want to go through this list yourself, go through the show notes, please do that. That can be really useful too. Okay, so we've talked about dopamine crash, emotional regulation, burnout. Okay, another really common one this happens to me a lot, especially I ran my own business for 6 years. This happens to me a lot. It'd be like, yep, cool, what's next? Did that, what's next? And it would be like I couldn't stop and pause and enjoy where I'd gotten to. It was just always looking on to the next thing. And I did reflect on that sometimes, and I just felt like that was something that wasn't really in my control, and I have to admit now I definitely do enjoy achievements a lot more. So I might finish off this episode with just sharing a bit about what's helped me with this, in case it gives you some ideas too. Other things sort of related to this, what's next, is like moving goalposts, and that can happen as part of like the imposter syndrome. So let's say, for instance, you're kind of like running a business, or you've got a creative project that you're doing, or I think it can even happen in your romantic life, your personal life, right? Like it's sort of like you can go, okay, when I started, I just wanted to be able to pass all of my university subjects, let's say. That's where I started. I wanted to be able to pass all my university subjects. And then it's like you pass all of them. And instead of going, well done to me, it's like straight onto, those people did better than me. I need to be getting credits. So instead of it being like, oh, that was good enough, it's like, I'm not good enough, even though I achieved the goal I set out to achieve, because now I've created this bigger goal and this bigger goal and this bigger goal. Same with businesses, right? Might be like, I just need to get that first client. Once I get that first client, like that's going to be, that's like a great big milestone to have accomplished. But as soon as you do that, instead of being like, tick, I've done that, it's sort of like, I probably need to get 5, right? And it just kind of moves and moves and moves. Sometimes I wish I could see the response of people watching or listening to this, because I feel like, I don't know, when people say things that I can relate to, I'm like, yes, exactly, that happens all the time. And last sort of, I guess, big one is around, and this sort of ties into where I started to find a way out of some of these patterns, is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So when I talked about violin before and like going up to perform, I didn't really have a goal around, like I didn't do violin because I loved violin. Like I didn't run up to my parents and go, please buy me a violin, I want to do violin. It was sort of like, that was part of like homeschooling, that was part of the structure, like, and I'm like, that's great, like to get kids to learn musical instruments, fine. I don't think there's anything bad or anything. I think it was great to have that skill, but it just didn't come from the inside. It was coming from, oh, my parents will think I'm really great, or my violin teacher will think I'm really great, or the audience will think I'm really great. And I wasn't doing it because I loved it. I wasn't doing it because I felt passionately about it from the inside. When I started doing it, I enjoyed when I could start playing well, and I was like, oh, okay, I can actually play this now. But it still felt largely about like, what do other people think of me? I need to show off. I need to show people how good I am, Don't judge me too hard. I was a kid. But yeah, like, I mean, and also saying that, like, I don't judge myself, and I also don't judge other people for doing that either, right? It's really understandable. Like, it's nice when people say nice things about you, but when it's coming from the outside, it can end up leaving us feeling a bit empty. And the alternative to that is intrinsic motivation. And for neurodivergent people, I think this is really interesting, because I think that there's also this feeling for a lot of us that you kind of feel like an alien, you kind of feel like an outsider, and you're looking at everyone else and you're like, how come everyone else can just like seem to make life work? How come it's so easy for people to just go and do these things? For me, one of the things I really struggled with as a kid was like making friends, like I had friends, but I didn't have an easy time making friends. I often would find kids really boring. I feel like they're not interested in the same things as me. They don't want to talk about the same things as me. In high school, I think a lot of people would have described me as really intense, because I'd be like, oh, this happened, like I really want to talk about this, and I would find it maybe hard to take a step back and think about what other people want to talk about and listen. That was a real skill I had to learn. And for a lot of us, what happens obviously, and I think we would all be familiar with that concept of masking, right? So you can kind of end up putting up like a facade of like, oh, this is who I need to pretend to be. And so then you look at like, what are the checkbox things I need to be doing that seem to make everyone else think that like you're achieving things, like, okay, finish school, go to university, find a partner, get married, have kids, like regardless of whether they're things that you want to do, it's sort of like, where am I going to be seen to be achieving things, right? And then it would depend on your culture. It might depend on your gender, if you care about that. For me, I'm like non-binary. I'm like, I don't really care about gender. I find it strange that so many people care about gender. But, you might feel that pressure still. Like I definitely felt a pressure to behave a certain way, to mask as like a woman, or a girl. And so you're trying to kind of meet these standards constantly, and you don't actually end up, for me anyway, I didn't end up spending a lot of time thinking about what do I actually want. Like it took decades for me to actually think about that, really, even though I was really quite clear on that being important from quite a young age. So I remember learning about like the top regrets of the dying when I was, 18, 19. I started off my university degree studying psychology, and then I moved into neuroscience. I was really aware of, these concepts in some ways, right? One of the top regrets of the dying is that I wish I could have lived a life more true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, like that really scares me. I definitely don't want to be that kind of person who doesn't live a life that's true to themselves. So I was really aware of that, but then I continued to do that because I had so much self-doubt about like my own ideas and opinions and values and interests, like what I thought was interesting, what I thought was valuable, what I wanted for my life, even being gay. Like I didn't figure out I was gay until I was in my 30s, because I think I just felt a lot of pressure to try to, like it was completely, just buried. I was trying to pretend to be someone else without even realizing it. And so I think when it comes to, like for me, when I made that switch into being more intrinsically motivated, being more motivated from actually what's happening inside me and what I value and the processes that I enjoy being a part of, like the creative process, things like that. I would dabble, but I would usually, in the past, I'd dabble in something that I was interested in, but it wasn't really connected with like feeling like, it was like I wasn't tuned into my own inner voice, right? So I probably should just clarify, like when we talk about extrinsic motivation, I mentioned we're talking about what other people think, what other people value. It's also to do with reward and money. So say, for instance, it could be an intangible reward like recognition, or it could be a tangible reward like money or fame or TikTok followers, YouTube followers. That's like chasing that extrinsic reward, right? That extrinsic motivation, chasing a reward. Intrinsic motivation, or it can also be avoiding punishment as well. Intrinsic motivation is like, I'm doing this because I actually really just enjoy doing it, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether I get recognized, regardless of whether other people see this or tell me it's valuable. I find it valuable to do. So an example might be, I really enjoy researching a particular topic, or I really enjoy reading. I don't ever need to see anyone react to that, but I just really enjoy the process. I do it for myself. And for me, like I said, when I kind of just, it was almost like flipping a switch. When I tuned into what I really wanted in terms of my sexuality and my relationships, the relationships I wanted to pursue romantically, the person I really was, and and sort of valuing that, and sort of the way I described it was like showing up in my own life. When I did that, it was all of a sudden like, bang, now I can do this with all these other things. So it's not to say that I don't ever feel emptiness from success. I think the reason I put success in quotation marks is that to me is like outside world success. Outside world success of people going, oh, that's so good, like you got an award at work, or that's so good that you did, got this qualification, or that's so good you did this. It's like, I don't really care about that. I go to work because, like, one, I need money to live, and two, because I get to help people, which I enjoy, and that's an intrinsic motivation. I don't really care if other people know that I help people, as long as the person that I help feels helped. Like, that's all that really matters. Like, if they're feeling better about their life and their decisions, that's enough. And I don't really even need them to say it. So it's not like about them telling me, oh, thanks so much, that was really helpful. It's more if I can see like, oh, this has been really helpful for them. Obviously, it's good to hear it just to know, like I'm not guessing, like, oh yeah, that was helpful, right? But just to know like, oh, that's I've been able to help someone in their lives, like that's what I want to do. Like with this, I might never hear back from people who watch my content or see my content, or like sometimes I do, I get some comments on things, but like for the most part, I kind of just put it out there because I enjoy doing this and I wish that someone said more of this stuff to me, so it feels rewarding in of itself. So I think that's where we can change the dynamic or the relationship with success a little bit, where it becomes not so much about achieving the thing, ticking the box, being successful in other people's eyes. It becomes really more about like, what is the process that I want to enjoy right now? I want to grow plants because I love seeing that process. I'm just going to do that because it's doing the task is rewarding in of itself. So that's about it from me tonight. 23 minutes. That's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty close to 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you thought. You can leave a comment on my Substack, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can drop a comment below. If you are listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, it's called Apple Podcasts now. Can you please, if you enjoyed this, leave a 5-star review, ideally. So you can just do the stars, or if you're feeling extra generous, you can also leave a comment as well. That really is like the biggest thing that helps with growing podcasts. And it's really hard when you're just doing this from home in terms of getting it out there. Sitting down and talking, not hard, but getting it out there is hard. So that's like the biggest thing that you can do to help this. So if you found this helpful and you're like, I love the idea of other people like yourself or myself hearing this, then please, if you could rate and review this episode and maybe share it with a neurodivergent friend of yours as well. All right, I'll chat to you next week. Until then, I hope this has helped you live a more balanced-ish life, and I'll speak to you then.